A teenager woke up late in a quiet Kentucky town. By noon, her car still sat in the driveway with the driver's door cracked, a single shoe on the floorboard, and a phone on the seat with the numbers 9 and 1 already pressed. The rest of her things were scattered in the back: school books, work clothes, her purse. She was gone. No broken windows, no tire tracks peeling out. Just a house that felt wrong, and a story that would twist for years before the truth finally showed its face. You're watching Fractured Files, where we sit with the cases that splinter families and shake entire towns. Jessica Dishon grew up in Shepherdsville, Kentucky, a small place where people waved from their porches and everyone knew whose kid was whose. She was the oldest sister, the reliable one. She helped with her younger brothers, kept her grades up, and picked up a part-time job at a local restaurant. She saved for a red Pontiac. She talked about college, accounting, a steady life she could build with her own hands. By the fall of 1999, she was 17, a senior and newly dating. Friday, September 10th, 1999. The morning started the way 100 other mornings had. Her parents left early for work while she slept. Her brothers caught the bus and went to school. Jessica planned to drive herself to school. Around noon, her mother came home and felt the first cold edge of panic. Jessica's car was still parked out front. Inside the house, her room was empty. No note, no sound from the shower, no call from the school about a sick student waiting in the office. She checked again, the kind of second pass every parent makes when they want to prove themselves wrong. Still nothing. Then the car told its own story. The driver's door was slightly open. On the front seat, her cell phone with the numbers 9 and 1 punched in, frozen on a call that never went through. Beneath the seat, one of Jessica's shoes and her keys. In the back, her purse, her textbooks, her work clothes. The things Jessica took with her were still there. She was not. Something had gone wrong here, not far away. Jessica was not the type to leave her things scattered and walk off with one shoe. She would not dial 9 and 1 unless she needed help. The family called the school and learned she had never made it to class. They called her work. She had missed her shift too. The quiet panic became a siren in their heads. They went to the sheriff. They explained the scene, the open door, the half-dialed phone, the shoe, the location, the timing. The sheriff told them not to worry. She probably wandered off and would come home. He did not look at the shoe and ask what kind of wandering leaves a girl barefoot. He did not treat the phone like a flare fired in daylight. He did not open an investigation. When the system shrank away, the family did not. They organized calls to relatives, friends, anyone who might have seen her. They knocked on doors and checked the route she would have taken to school. They made their own search list and started crossing off the easy items. As daylight slid away, they went farther out, toward the river where the brush grew thick. That stretch of water had a bad reputation. Dealers liked its cover. People who meant harm knew its dead ends. The men in Jessica's family knew the land, so they walked it as long as the light allowed. They went back to the sheriff the next morning. This time, 2 officers came to look at the car. They did not wear gloves and touched what was inside. They did not even treat the inside of the house like a scene and failed to secure the bedroom. The family watched the possibility of good evidence smudge under bare hands and ordinary carelessness. After that, trust evaporated. The family reached out to local media. They printed and posted flyers. They led search parties. They kept the phone lines hot. The town responded. Volunteers showed up with flashlights and questions. That night, the fear in the house had a sound to it. The next morning, it had a voice. Jessica's younger brother ran in from the yard saying he heard someone outside cry for help. Their father grabbed his shotgun and sprinted out. At almost the same moment, his brother pulled into the driveway to help. They searched the property lines, listened for anything. No one answered back. Then a different noise, smoke rising across the way. The smoke drifted from the property of 40-year-old David Brooks. He was burning something that looked like clothing. When Jessica's father asked to walk his land, Brooks said no and told them to leave. After that, he began driving slowly past the Dishon home, staring at the family with a smile that felt like a taunt. The phone at the Dishon house started ringing with silence on the other end, with only the kind of breathing that makes your skin crawl. The family pressed the police to bring dogs to Brooks's place. Investigators agreed. The dogs tracked scent toward a fire pit on his property. In one of the sheds, handlers found black gloves that drew an alert. There was a smell associated with decomposition on those gloves. It was not proof a jury could hold yet, but it was enough to push harder. The FBI entered the case. They treated the house like a scene that should have been sealed on day one. They collected fingerprints from the car and Jessica's room. They pulled potential evidentiary items and sent them to the lab. They brought in helicopters and more volunteers. They drained and searched a pond near the home. They paced back onto Brooks's property with fresh eyes and patience. There was something they could not shake. In one of Brooks's sheds, agents found a printed photo of Jessica, tucked where it did not belong. A man who had a photo of a missing teen in his outbuilding. A fire pit that drew dog alerts, silent calls to a grieving family, a neighbor creeping past with a smile. It all stacked up in a way that made perfect sense to anyone watching the news at home. 17 days after Jessica disappeared, a driver pulled onto the shoulder near the river where her father had searched those first days. Something near a tree looked wrong enough to make a stranger stop. When the driver got close, the wrongness became unavoidable. She called it in. The agents who arrived found a young woman's body, badly decomposed, a rope tied around her legs. Red and silver paint scratched across the strands, some clothing missing. The remains of hands were not complete. The body was moved carefully and taken for identification and autopsy. The call to the Dishon home was the kind of call that makes time stop for families. The police asked for help to identify the body. Jessica's father said he could not go. Jessica's mother went. At first, she could not say for sure. Then she saw a small butterfly tattoo in a familiar place. It was her daughter. Medical examiners found signs consistent with strangulation. There was evidence that parts of her limbs and fingers had been removed after death. She had likely been alive for around 3 days after she went missing. That would have been the window for a serious search conducted with urgency. The FBI re-interviewed Brooks. In his earlier conversations, he had said he saw Jessica near her house that morning. Now he said he had not. He told them he was in bed with his wife. Agents went to his wife and heard a different story. When the FBI asked Brooks how he would handle it if his fingerprints were found on the body, he said he would have to confess to everything. He also failed a polygraph. A rope in his car looked very much like the one around Jessica's legs, but there was no DNA that investigators could recover from it. There was a picture in his shed. There were dogs at his fire pit. There were silent phone calls. There was a smile that upset everyone who saw it. The case felt like a net cinching close around one man. It still did not close. In early 2003, the case went to trial with only circumstantial evidence. During the investigation, limbs had been found near the scene. They were placed in containers and handed off. The containers were labeled clearly for cold storage. They sat at room temperature. Whatever biological trace might have survived to stitch the case tight was ruined by heat and time. The rope in Brooks's car could not tie a knot around him in court. The jurors could not reach a unanimous decision. He did not walk out guilty. He did not go away forever. He walked free under the law that says you can try a person again only when new evidence surfaces. The Dishon family sat with the idea he might never see the inside of a cell for what they believed he had done. Years passed. The case sat like a stone on a shelf. People learned to walk around it. Then a new detective took a second look. In 2012, Detective Lynn Hunt joined the department and was assigned to old cases that had not gone anywhere. She pulled the Dishon file and found gaps big enough to drive a truck through. Notes that did not name who said what. Interviews that were not properly logged. Evidence without clear chains of custody. She had to start again, piece by piece, 13 years after the worst day in that house. She visited the Dishon family right away. One of Jessica's brothers, now grown and living on his own, handed over a box of his sister's belongings from the car, items the police had given back long ago and that had never been stored the way evidence should be. Hunt knew in her bones that time had stolen what those objects might have told her. She still cataloged every piece. She read every page and stared at every photo. In the stack, she found a medical report for Brooks. It listed his IQ as only 61. That detail changed the way she read everything he had said before. It did not clear him, but it did recast his contradictions and the failed polygraph in a light that made sense. People with low IQ scores can struggle to keep up with rapid questions. They can change stories because they do not grasp how a story is being tested for consistency. Hunt did not throw out his name. She removed the weight she had given to the shape of his answers and decided to look again at everyone else. That second look brought a phone call in September 2014. An inmate in a Kentucky prison said he knew who killed Jessica Dishon. He said the man had confessed and bragged in their shared cell. The inmate did not grope for details. He gave them in clean lines that matched parts of the case that had never been public. He named the man. When Hunt heard it, she had to sit down. It was not David Brooks. It was Stanley Dishon, Jessica's uncle, her father's brother. According to the informant, Stanley had told him he had abused Jessica for years, keeping her quiet with threats that he would kill her or harm someone she loved. When she started seeing a boy in the spring of 1999, he panicked and decided the risk of exposure was too high. On the morning she disappeared, Stanley confronted her as she climbed into her car. When she tried to call for help, he grabbed her. He bound her with bed sheets in her room and took her to an abandoned shed not far from where her body would later be found. He kept her alive there for days, abused her, tortured her, and then killed her. Afterward, he moved her body to a more visible place near the road, and he buried the sheets beneath the shed floor. He said he removed limbs to make investigators think drug traffickers had done the killing. He said he had buried one of her shoes beneath a broken tree near the shed. Hunt listened for the thing that separates truth from jailhouse fiction. She heard it. The details matched elements that had never been published, like the buried bedding, like the exact mention of a shoe under a particular tree. She needed evidence in the ground, not just words in the air. She did not have the full team she needed to search. She asked Jessica's brother and a few relatives to help her dig, and she did not tell them why. They went out in the rain to the spot that matched the informant's description. They dug until the light left. Nothing. The next day, Hunt returned with Jessica's brother. On the drive, he pointed to an old barn by the road and said it fit what they were looking for. They went inside. A few feet down, the shovel hit fabric. Hunt carried it to the Dishon home. Jessica's room had not been changed. The missing sheet from her bed matched the fabric pulled. That was enough to arrest Stanley Dishon. The family split in half under the shock. Jessica's father could not make the world line up with what he was being told. He had searched with his brother in those first days. He had walked the riverbank with him. At one point, when they were not far from where the barn stood, Stanley had said he felt sick and needed to go home. Jessica's father drove him back. The arrest opened other doors. As Hunt built her case, more women in the family came forward. They said Stanley had abused them too, that he had a pattern. He would say he needed a place to stay for a while. Family would take him in. When the girls were alone, he would assault them. He would threaten them into silence. It had gone on for years, decades. The picture got clearer and more awful. Hunt also found a box of documents that had not been read closely enough the first time. Inside it was a letter dated June 26, 2002, from another informant, another inmate who said Stanley had confessed back then. He described the abduction. He described where she was held. He described the dismemberment after death. He talked about buried bedding. The letter had been ignored because investigators were locked in on Brooks. Hunt knew a case like this would be hard to carry across the finish line. There was no magic strand of DNA that survived the mishandled early days. There was no fingerprint in the exact place you would hope to find one. There was a buried sheet that matched the missing bedding. There were confessions recounted by two different inmates 12 years apart. There were victims who described decades of abuse. There were details that had not been public. There was a family that had to hear that the real danger had been at their dinner table and on their search parties. Stanley Dishon did not stand in court and tell the story himself. In 2015, prosecutors offered a deal. They would not seek the death penalty if he pleaded guilty to Jessica's murder and to the assaults within the family. He took it. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with a possibility of parole after 15. Jessica's parents wanted the whole truth, but they did not get it. In 2019, he gave an interview and said he did not kill her, that he had been at work that morning. His denial did not move the core of the case. People still ask about David Brooks. Some investigators still think it is possible he touched the edges of the crime without understanding the full picture. That he might have burned clothing or handled an item that carried the scent the dogs found. That he might have been used or manipulated in some small way. He died in 2021 of heart problems, so whatever he knew will not be said in a courtroom. The creepy drive-bys and the photo in the shed still sit there in the case file like nails without a board to hold. People also return to the moment on the third day after Jessica disappeared, when her younger brother ran inside and said he heard someone outside call for help. Maybe the boy's mind made a sound where there was none. Maybe someone else shouted and it crossed the yard at the wrong time. Or the hardest thought, maybe Jessica was still alive and close, and the right search had not reached the right place yet. The grief in this story is layered. There is the first sharp grief of losing a daughter and a sister. There is the slow anger that builds when a sheriff tells you your child probably wandered off. There is the distrust in police mishandling evidence. There is the horror of learning that a man you trusted at your table used that trust as a cover. There is the ache of sitting in a courtroom where the person who hurt your child can trade a confession for a smaller sentence. When people in Shepherdsville speak Jessica's name, they remember a girl who saved every dollar for a red car, who helped with homework at the kitchen table, who wanted to balance books for a living, who took a job and kept good grades and looked like the future every parent wants to see when they stand in a doorway and look into a teenager's room. They also remember a house that felt safe until it did not. If there is anything to take from Jessica's story, it is this. When something feels wrong in your own driveway, treat it like fire. The right first hours matter. The voice that says wait can cost you the time you need. And hope is not a plan. Her family moved when the system did not, and later a detective moved when older files said stop. That is what broke this case open. Not a miracle. Work. Stubbornness. Digging until fabric comes up out of cold ground. Thank you for watching Fractured Files. If you want more stories where the truth hides close to home and only shows itself when someone refuses to give up, subscribe and stick with us. We'll be back soon.